All right, guys, we are back. It's Jesse Wright with YouCouldBe.com, and in today's episode, we have a very special guest. It's Dan Lane from the Rental Income Podcast, and today he is going to be talking about the top 5 things that he has learned from interviewing over 170 real estate investors. Dan, really happy to have you on the show. First of all, can you tell me just a little bit about, what caused you to even create this podcast? What gave you the idea to go out and interview 170 people and
Kind of a crazy, So I guess it's about 4 years ago. Well, actually, maybe let me take you back a little bit further. So I've always wanted to invest in rental properties. It's just always been something I've wanted to do, but I could never quite figure out how to get started. The numbers never really made sense to me. It seemed really risky, and it was just something in the back of my head that I wanted to do, but I just never took any action on it. And about 4 years ago, my wife decided that we were going to buy a new house, and so I had to figure out what I was going to do with our old house. And I thought, this might be my opportunity to become a rental property investor by renting out the old house. So that's what we did. I found some tenants, I rented the place out, and once I got that first check, that first rent check, and I paid the mortgage, and I had some cash flow left over, I was hooked. And I wanted to figure out how to do this again, but I didn't know how to do it. Everything didn't quite 100% make sense to me on how I could do this again. And so I love listening to podcasts, and I was looking for a show where they interviewed rental property owners talking about how they built their portfolio and what it's like being a landlord. And I couldn't find what I was looking for. So I decided to start the Rental Income Podcast just basically as a platform to ask my questions. I really didn't know if anyone would listen to it or not, but it was really just basically for me. So now the show took off. I've been doing it for 4 years, and I've interviewed 170 people. So it's been kind of a crazy journey.
It's actually man, as many people, as many gurus and some really good guys too that you see out there. I've seen so many people that they hook you in, and then they want to charge you $10,000 to spill all the juicy goods. And it sounds like you found a way to get all that for free.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's what we did.
No doubt.
I tip people's brains. I out their secrets, and people. I find real estate investors in general are pretty open about sharing information.
Yeah.
And you were on a podcast about a year ago, and you shared some great information. And everybody that we've had on the show, I always learn 1 or 2 things every episode.
Yeah.
And it doesn't cost anything; it's totally free. And I learn a lot, and I'm happy that my followers learn a lot too.
Let's get started with this list of top things you've learned.
Yeah, so really, I think these are all really cool things, and they're not really in any particular order, but
okay.
But so the first thing that I learned from talking to a lot of really successful investors, and this is going to sound kind of controversial because I know a lot of real estate investors love leverage, but a lot of the most successful investors I've talked on the show that have really hit financial freedom, they've actually paid off their rental properties. And that is something that I think people should work towards. We've had some people on the show. I think when you've always paid cash for your properties, right?
Right. It's easier for me to do though because they're really inexpensive they're properties.
Right.
Yeah.
But we've had other people on the show that have bought more expensive properties and they've taken out mortgages, but they've just made extra payments every month, and it's really incredible just by paying a little bit extra every month how you can really quickly pay off your mortgage. So that's what we've done. We had one guy on the show that it took him 15 years. He has, I think, about 40 rentals.
Wow.
And he bought them all on 15-year mortgages. And he started when he was 30, and when he was in his mid-40s, he had this whole portfolio paid off, and now the
Wow.
guy's living the life.
Oh man.
So it's really, yeah. So it's really, really kind of cool. So I think working towards paying. I mean, if you can buy properties with cash, that's great. But most people, I think, are going to have to take out a mortgage. So if you can take out a mortgage, just work on getting that paid off. And over time, it's like, say if you have a property that has a $500 mortgage, once you get rid of that, you've just given yourself a $500 a month raise for the rest of your life.
Exactly.
So it really, I think, just it'll multiply your cash flow if you can get these properties paid off over time.
Absolutely. And
so,
is that your number one reason? Is it the fact that it's going to increase the cash flow, or is it the stress that comes along with the mortgage, or is it just because you've seen that it seems like a lot of the more successful investors do pay them off? Is there a specific reason behind?
Yeah, that's a great question. That there's so many benefits to paying it off. I mean, obviously the cash flow is a big one, but you also just have less risk. It's like, what's the worst that can really happen if the house is paid off? If it goes vacant for 6 months and you just can't find the right tenant, it's really, you don't feel that pressure that you have a mortgage, that you've got to get it paid off, where a lot of times you have a mortgage and you maybe have a marginal tenant, and you might feel some pressure to take them just because you need to get some income again on the property. So you definitely you take the risk out of it when you get your properties paid off. And I realize that's not for everybody, and
sure,
we've had a lot of people on the show that love leverage and would never want to pay it off. But when I look at a lot of the wealthiest people we've had on the show, the thing they have in common is that they paid off their rentals.
Well, that says something for sure. And the thing about leverage too is, if you do pay it off, there's nothing that would say that you couldn't at some later point go and leverage the property again if you needed to. And at least then the equity would be available if you did find yourself in a terrible situation and you did need to do that at a later time. Whereas if you're leveraged up, then you don't have that opportunity. So
that's true. That's absolutely true. Or, if the market drops and you have to lower your rent $200 a month, like you're not in a situation where you're upside down every month. So yeah, like there's a lot of benefits. I think there's a lot more upside than downside. Now, of course, the downside is maybe that you have that money that's just kind of locked up in the house, and maybe you can't use that money to buy other properties. So, there is some kind of a trade-off there. But, I think if your properties are paid off, it really doesn't take that many properties to have financial freedom, to be able to do whatever you want with your life. If you have 10 or 20 properties paid off, I mean, you've really kind of got it made.
You're golden.
So
the second thing that I see on your list is that it's important to pick a niche. Can you tell me a little bit about?
Yeah. Sure. So the other thing that I've noticed that the most successful people have in common is that they're not just looking for good deals. A lot of people say they're looking for a deal, and if they find a deal and the numbers make sense, they're going to buy it. Most of the really successful people that we've had on the podcast, they really specialize in a niche. Maybe it's college rentals or Section 8 properties or luxury houses or manufactured homes. Like, they specialize in one niche. They figure out what works, and they just keep doing it over and over and over again. So, if you're buying the same properties in the same neighborhoods, it really doesn't take that much analysis. You know what the properties cost, what they're going to rent for. So, find something that works and just keep doing it over and over again. Where, it's like if you keep branching out to different areas, you've got to learn that market again. You don't have any synergies, where if your properties are all in the same general area, if you find a good contractor, you can use them on all your properties. Or if you have properties in 7 different states, it just becomes a nightmare to keep track of everything. So,
absolutely.
So specialize. I think that's that is the most important thing with rentals and really with life is just specialize and become really good at one thing.
And what, if you don't mind sharing, if you do, that's okay, but what have you found to be the perfect niche for you?
Yeah, so my properties are in like working class neighborhoods. So I like renting to people that are in the kind of neighborhoods where when you drive down the street, you see a work truck in every other driveway. Like just like working class, hardworking people. I find that they generally have stable jobs. Most of my tenants have families. Of course, if they don't, I'm not going to discriminate against them, but most of them just happen to have families and they want their kids to go to good schools, and they tend to stay once their kids are in school. They don't want to be moving their kid around to a different school. So I don't have a lot of turnover, and I don't really have any problems with my tenants. So that's really kind of my niche. I realized I could make more money in maybe a different niche, like in your niche. I mean, the returns you get are incredible, but I don't want the hassle. My
Sure.
rentals are just kind of boring, and
Hey,
I like them that way.
boring is nice. Boring is worry-free, right? Good deal.
Exactly.
Good deal. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, what next? What should we talk about next?
All right. So the next one is has to do with risk, and this is I think hard for a lot of people to wrap their head around. But I think if you ask somebody what's more risky, having one property or having 10 properties, I think most people would say, well, having 10 properties is risky. You have 10 basements that could flood, or 10 roofs that needs to be replaced. But the way that successful investors think is that one property is risky and 10 properties is less risky, because with 10 properties you're more diversified. So if you only have one tenant and that tenant moves out, you've got nothing. I mean, you've got no income. You're dead in the water. And what tends to happen with one property is you're just on this constant roller coaster ride. So your tenant pays, nothing breaks, you're happy, but then the next month you have a $500 repair bill, and you hate the rental, and you want to sell, and you don't want anything to do with it. Where if you have 10 properties, if you have a vacancy, it almost doesn't matter, because you have 9 other rent checks coming in that month. If there's a problem with one property, you've got cash flow from 9 other properties that are going to help you pay for that. So it's an interesting concept, but the more rentals you have, the less risky it is.
Absolutely.
So yeah. So you feel the same way?
I do.
Yeah.
To the point even where, I'm pretty aggressive with some of the things that I do. And actually, this year is the first year that I've even insured any of my properties at all.
Wow.
And
wow.
the reason for that, and I know that's crazy, I don't even know if I should say that on YouTube, because I don't want anybody making any kind of crazy mistakes. But the way that I think about it is, and this again is just for my specific niche, if I'm only paying $15,000 for a house, and my goal is to have 50 houses, well, at some point, if you're paying $800 a year for each of these properties, and I know that's, you can get it for much cheaper. I think the last house I got it for was like $450, but originally I was thinking it was going to cost about $800 a year per house. And even with 3 houses, $800 a year times 5 years, and we're talking about another house.
Right, totally. So, yeah, it's like at some point you would have to lose like a house every year just to have it make sense.
Exactly.
But I think for anyone listening, I think we should just make it clear: get insurance.
Absolutely. And well, the liability as well from the tenants. If somebody falls and breaks their neck or something like that, I mean, there's a
right. That's true. And you might be able to get like a liability only policy that's cheaper. I don't know, it might be worth looking into that. But but yeah, insurance is something that's expensive, and it's one of those expenses that just kind of goes up every year. And every year when my policies come up, they're always a little bit higher. But also, I think with insurance, it's something you should shop around, because I have two properties that are on the same street, and I have them insured with different companies because the rate for one company was just like $300 more a year.
Wow.
Than the other property. So, and I don't know what that is. I mean, they're both similar properties, but it just didn't make sense to insure them with the same company. So, yeah, so I think you've really got to shop around. Yeah, I think the rates can really vary.
Absolutely. And they do, going back to what you said, not to hijack this or anything, but they do have what's called a premises policy. Not a lot of insurance companies do this anymore, but that would be one, like you were saying, that would cover the liability without necessarily insuring the property. But that's off the table for almost everybody, unless they're going to, again, pay off their rentals anyway, because you're going to have full coverage if...
Exactly, yeah. That's true. Yeah. That's true. But yeah, there was someone that I spoke to a couple years ago. We couldn't work it out for him to come on the show, but he had a huge portfolio, like, hundreds of properties, and he didn't have insurance on his properties either, for the same reason as you. He was buying really lower end properties, and it just didn't make sense.
Let's see what we got here.
To know your numbers.
Okay, let's hear it.
So you've really got to kind of do some projections before you buy a property, and kind of estimate what you think things are going to cost. How much money you're going to put aside for repairs that come up. And then also you've got to save money for bigger things. They call it CapEx, that are not things that are going to just break or come up every year, but say like a roof, you might only have to worry about once every 20 years, but you've got to be saving money every month so that when that roof does need to be replaced, you have the money for it. Or like a hot water heater might last you 10 years, but when it goes, I mean, that's going to be several $100s to replace it. So it's really good to kind of figure out what things are going to cost, budget for that, and just really kind of make sure that before you buy a property, it's going to be profitable when you account for your mortgage, your taxes, insurance, and setting money aside. Like, make sure there's going to be money there. So, I've talked to a lot of people that they might think a house is going to rent for $1,000 a month, and their mortgage is $900, and they think they have $100 in cash flow, but like they're going to lose money in that deal, and that's never going to be profitable.
That's a bad day right there. Let me ask you this. Yeah. In addition to the maintenance, when you're doing your projections, do you set any? Do you have a line item for the chance of unexpected vacancies?
Yeah, I do. I use 8%, which is about 1 month.
Okay.
A year, and I haven't had that, but I do set some money aside for that, just because there probably will come a time when maybe a property is hard to rent or something happens. So like I do set money aside to help me out, because I know that day is coming eventually.
Gotcha. Good.
Do you?
Well,
do you put money?
I don't, but I probably should. I don't have a problem with vacancies. I do, I wouldn't say frequently, but man, this last year I think I've had 3 evictions, wow. But every single time I did it, probably within 36 hours from the time they had moved out, I already had the properties rented, so. Yeah, and if you're not in a niche go ahead.
Yeah, let me ask you. So if I can hijack the show here for a second. So what happened? Like, why do you think you had those 3 evictions? Like looking back on it now, did those tenants have any red flags, or could you have seen that things weren't going to work out when you rented to them?
Actually, it was They all started out great. I wouldn't say, I don't actually check people's credit. I look more at their income. I don't even know if the way that I do it is technically legal. I just kind of size the person up. So the first eviction, I had a Section 8 tenant that was a great tenant. They lived there for, probably 3-4 years. And then they started making more money. And so their Section 8 dropped down to where Section 8 was only paying about $50 of their rent every month. And right, so now they're paying the rest of it, and they actually were not good with money at all. And so I did get a great run out of them, but after that, I just had to kick them out, And I had another one. It was kind of the same. It was a little different, actually. It was a mother and a daughter. They both worked at a vehicle plant. We have a Nissan plant here in Mississippi, and so they were both really hard workers. And I felt really bad about this one, but the mother got sick. Now, she didn't have cancer or anything. She wasn't dying, but she just wasn't able to work for months. And really, I broke every rule in the book with them because I was really trying to help them out. So I gave them like 2 months, where they were still paying some, but they were paying like $450 a month or something like that, and this last one, it's the most bizarre of all. I was on a boat leaving the Bahamas, headed back to Florida, and I get a text message, no service in this big ocean, but I just, for whatever reason, in this one particular place, I get this text message from this lady, and her husband were my tenants, and she tells me that her husband has been shot, and he died.
Lord.
Wow. Yeah, it turned out that I guess I won't tell the story, but it sounds like he deserved it. and if he hadn't been shot by somebody else, she probably would have been the one to shoot him. But yeah, so that's my 3 eviction stories.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's crazy. With that first tenant, they'd been with you for so long, everything had been going great, and then things changed. And I think that's a good lesson, is that things can change. That good tenants can go bad. I mean, you can have someone that's with you for 10 years and then they lose their job and they can't pay you anymore. So
absolutely,
it's like you just gotta kind of be firm and evict them. And that's the great thing, is that if someone doesn't pay, I guess that's something to watch out for. So in Mississippi, like I think it's pretty easy to evict, right? It's a pretty landlord-friendly state.
As long as you put it in the lease, you don't even have to. You don't even have to take them to court. As long as you can keep the peace and there's a clause in the lease, you can just carry their stuff out onto the front yard. Wow. Yeah, it's it's almost too good to the landlord, but I'll take advantage of it.
Where in a lot of states, it's like very hard to evict somebody. So I think for anyone that's looking to get started, is you really got to make sure, a lot of times, that wherever you live, it might not make sense to invest there, because if it's going to take you 6 months or a year to get somebody out, that's a lot of lost money. So
absolutely.
So definitely check into your eviction laws before you buy something, is some advice I would give to anybody.
Absolutely.
So all right, so number 5 is to set money aside for emergencies, because whatever, like, all kinds of crazy things can happen when you own rental properties. Like, say with that eviction, maybe like they didn't trash it. None of them trashed your houses, did they?
No, thankfully. I've been blessed as far as that goes.
But what if they did $5,000 of damage on the way out, or you get in there and they've done whatever to the property. Bad things can happen, and things a lot of times cost way more than you think they're going to cost to get them fixed. So definitely set money aside, because it's all about survival with this game. That if things go bad, you just want to be able to survive, because things are eventually going to turn around. But if you run out of money and you can't fix something, you're probably going to lose that house. So yeah, make sure you set money aside.
Absolutely. Yeah, that and
Yeah.
that's one of those things. Again, if you have to, the more you can learn about these things, fixing this stuff up. I talk about that a lot in my channel. You can at least lower that risk, like new floors and things like that. But again, most people have a full-time job, and it's very hard to even get into the rehab and remodel. Have you ever tried any of that before on your own, or have you always hired contractors?
No, I haven't. I mean, I'm not the most handy guy. I'm lucky if I can change a light bulb. So I definitely I outsource everything. I have property managers for my properties too. So for me, my goal is to make this as passive as possible.
Gotcha.
So really, my extent of my involvement in my rentals is the occasional email every now and then with the property manager, and then looking over the statement every month. But yeah, for me, this is I don't want this to become another job. I really just want the passive income.
I gotcha. Well, and I'm not trying to hijack this, and I know you probably got to go here in a second, but I do have so many people ask me about property managers. Do I recommend them, especially for buying out of state? And I've always managed my own, and so for someone that has done that, how much looking around did you have to do in order to find these property managers? Did you get lucky right from the beginning, or did you have to kind of work through a couple of them before you found the right ones?
So yeah, I got somewhat lucky. So I work with 3 different property managers. My properties are in 3 different towns.
Okay.
So I have a property manager, like a local property manager, that's close to each property. And 2 of them are really good. I mean, they really do a great job. The 3rd property manager is just horrible. I mean, they are just, they're always late paying me. They always make mistakes on their statements. They're just a really poorly run company. So, for them, I had vetted them really well. I mean, I had talked to them a bunch of times before I used them. They answer the questions right, and that's a tough thing with property managers, that even a bad property manager knows how to answer the questions right. So you really, I think the best way to find one is just a referral from another investor, and then it's just, I think, trial and error.
Sure.
If you try at a property manager and that they're not working out, you just got to pull the property and bring it somewhere else.
Gotcha. Good deal.
So,
well,
yeah.
Well, Dan, I really appreciate you coming on the show today. Again, Dan is the host of the Rental Income Podcast. Dan, where's the best place for people to find that? Just iTunes, or?
Yeah, so most people listen on iTunes. I do put the put it up on YouTube also, but it's kind of awkward to listen to on YouTube because it's just an audio show. There's no video to it. So it is on YouTube. So we do have some people that listen on YouTube, but most people listen off iTunes or Stitcher or Spotify, iHeartRadio. It basically any podcast platform you can find the show. Just type in Rental Income Podcast.
Good deal. Do you have a website or anything like that we should point people towards?
Yeah, the website is rentalincomepodcast.com. You can listen there. There's not a whole lot of content on there right now. It's really just a podcast player, but I am working on making some changes. So in probably the next few weeks, we'll have a new site up. But yeah, you can listen to the show there right now.
Good deal, man. Well, again, I really appreciate you coming on the show. And for everybody else, we will see you next time.